Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Freedom Blueprint. I'm Adrienne Green, and today I have with me Kristi Kandel. Get ready for insights to help you scale, systemize, and create more freedom. Let's jump in. So thank you so much for being here with me, Kristi.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, my understanding, Kristi, is that you are on a mission to put real estate development back in the hands of the people who live, work, and invest in their communities. It sounds like you have over 20 years of experience and $450 million in projects done with major brands like Chick-fil-A and CVS. Now, I know you're doing all these great things now, and I'm excited to hear about them. And yet, I'd love us to start at the beginning. How did you get here?
Well, the journey started in a small town in Ohio. After college, I ended up moving to Florida and started working with a sign company who was putting up signs for CVS Pharmacy. And growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. Owning a house that you lived in wasn't even on my mind. So I never thought about real estate. I never thought about how communities are formed. And now I'm in this job where I'm putting up signs for these new CVSs that are being built and the shopping centers around them. And I'm starting to realize, oh my gosh, this is how our communities are formed. So after working with, I think they had about 6 different developers at the time in Florida, it became very clear who the leading group was. I was in the field one day and I was like, hey, Eric, what's it take to be a developer? And he looked back at me and he said something that changed my life because I thought he was going to say, go to school, do this, do that. And he said, for us, we're a smaller company. They were in the Tampa area. And they had 20 to 30 people. And he's like, we just want the right people with the right work ethics, the right personalities, the right fit. We'll teach you the business. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, all right, cool. When are you hiring me? And yeah, 3 weeks later, I ended up joining their company. They were primarily at the time working in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. And it was right in 2009. So right as, the economy has tanked and Family Dollar gives them a call and says, hey, we want to expand to California. They didn't have any locations there. Our company wasn't in California yet, but 2 of the guys had done developments in California previously. So they were out doing market research. And I get the call that, hey, Kristi, can you help us do sign and landscape code research? Like, yep, sign me up. So I'd work during the day on the East Coast projects. I'd keep working on the night because I just knew that if I got the chance to go to California to help open a new market, there would be so many opportunities that came up. So it ended up that by December of 2010, I was the front runner to be the one relocating to go out there because I was the only one without a spouse and multiple kids. So I was like, hey guys, I'm the lowest risk. Like, let's go figure it out, get an office, and then you guys move your whole families. So I ended up moving out in June of 2010. And for the next 4 years, from San Francisco to San Diego, we were developing $30 Family Dollars a year. So from the time the real estate managers got under contract, I was coming in doing city due diligence, finding architects and engineers, doing the entitlements, the planning commission and city council meetings, permitting, and construction management, all in my early 20s. So that was a whirlwind of experience. And I had a mentor. She'd been in the industry for 30 years. She's like, Kristi, you've gotten a 30-year career and worth of experience in the past 4 years. Like, what? Because I've always been an entrepreneur. So that just made me go, okay, I can use this. But at the time I was like, these are single tenant, 2-acre developments. What about shopping centers? What about industrial? What about multifamily? So instead of starting my own company, I took one more detour and I started working with a developer in Newport Beach, and he did all of that. And very quickly I realized it's all the same steps. It's just knowing the right questions to ask to define that project. And you get more time and more money the bigger the deal is because they're more complicated. 2015, I finally started my company, decade in now, and have built teams and systems and processes and software, and even started investing in my own smaller multifamily. So I have that in Nevada, Ohio, and Florida. And so many other businesses have spun out from that. Yeah, it was started an Ohio girl moving to Florida and kind of letting the universe do its magic.
And having the courage and the ambition to ask, hey, what does it take? And then to take that step even when it probably was kind of scary, right? To go into this world you didn't know and didn't have any experience with or anything, right?
Yeah, completely. And I've realized at this point, my family jokes with me. They're like, we used to say that the United States or the world was your comfort zone. They're like, the universe is your comfort zone now. And it's not that I don't feel the fear. It's the fact that I feel the fear and I don't let it stop me from taking action. So now today, anytime I get butterflies in my stomach and I'm nervous, I actually get excited because I go, ooh, I'm about to grow as a person right now.
That's a great way to see it. And I imagine it took years. So let's say you're talking to somebody who is at the beginning of that journey, right? Somebody who does still feel the fear, and that causes anxiety, that causes them to want to say no, that causes them to want to go live in a cave, maybe. If you're speaking to that person or to yourself, 15 years ago, what would you say to help them get to the next step on that journey?
I like to think about the worst case scenario. Like, what is the absolute worst that can happen? So when I was going to start my company, I left the golden handcuffs. I left well into six figures of a job living in Southern California, this guaranteed stable paycheck. And I bought an SUV and I laid in the back and I said, the worst thing that will happen is I become homeless because I don't make any money. I run out of all my savings. And I was like, yeah, the back of this Nissan Rogue, that'll do. Now, none of my friends would have let me be homeless, but that was the worst case scenario, is that I would sleep in the back of my car while then waiting to go back and get a W-2 job. And today that is still my biggest fear, way back in my mind, that, oh my gosh, my very worst fear is going back and doing what most people do every single day, and that's having a W-2. So when you realize that you're not going to be maimed and hurt, when you realize that you're not going to die from something, it's liberating. And then also realizing when you make a decision that it doesn't mean that you're on that path and you can never get off it. It just means that you made a decision and now you can course correct along the way, because as you're moving forward, you now have more information. So now you can course correct. Now you can take detours and you can change your mind.
Right. Right. That's a really, really good point. So with that in mind, a lot of people really don't know much about development. So let's say you're talking to somebody who's like, I hear development, it scares me, I'm not sure what it is. Could you maybe start with, why would somebody look at development? And let's talk about why they may be interested, and then we can dive into the what it looks like and the how.
Yeah. So good stat is that we have over 19,500 cities with permitting departments in the United States. Over 75% of those have communities with a population of less than 10,000 people. So when we talk development, we often hear the LAs, the San Franciscos, the New Yorks, the Miamis, these giant projects that are 50, 300 million, like however big. That's not what we're talking about for development in most communities. So if you can flip a house in these communities, you can flip that commercial building. And as the developer, the really cool part of that is you're finding the highest and best use for a piece of property, whether it's a building, a vacant lot, whatever it is. And in your town that you live in, you know the places that are missing where you want to live, work, and play. So you're actually the one who's uniquely qualified to go, I have been wanting this daycare center for my kids. How do we do it? There's a building and we can create this daycare center, and next to it, 2 more businesses. And now I've created a space I need and will use. I've also created 2 more businesses that are going to help pay my mortgage for the building. And I have now added jobs and impacted so many lives in my own community that it's being a developer is so exciting when we realize, yeah, the locals and us, normal people like us, can do it.
Yes, that is super exciting. And what are people's biggest fears that you run into as they start doing development? What holds them back, and what would you respond to that fear?
Number 1, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Number 2, where am I going to get the money? And number 3, how am I going to get anyone to take me seriously? Because I have been doing this for almost 20 years, I've realized that there are so many, like, even though every project and every city and every utility department is different, they're all very much the same. So I would start by finding the mentor, finding the person. There's only 2 or 3 people who own your community who are doing the work. Go make friends with them and start to talk to different people in your community. We have this where we call it 5 strategic partners. That's your broker, your lender, your architect, your engineer, and your contractor. Just start networking and getting out there and getting to know the people that you already interact with, but now talk to them on a business level. And you'll find really quickly that people are so willing to share their knowledge with someone, because very few people are willing to take action. So the minute you do take action, the minute you are putting in the effort, so many people are going to pour into you. And the same comes with money. Everyone has this fallacy that I don't have $1 million in the bank. Well, guess what? Being a developer in your small town, you don't need $1 million in the bank. You might need $100,000 to $300,000, and then you get debt from the local regional bank. And the other thing that we don't understand looking at development from the outside is that these developers who are doing the massive deals, they don't use their own money. They have outside investors that actually invest in, and very rarely do they use their own money. They have their company, they have their real estate managers, they have their development managers, they have their accounting team. So they're paying their overhead of their teams, just like you would put in your own sweat equity, but they're not using their own money. Very often in real estate investing, we get stuck in, I've got to put my money into this duplex, or I've got to put my money into that. With development, you have more time to do the project, but you also have bigger returns. So it allows you to leverage things like someone else's money, like building a team of experts, who the architect who's designed every building, the contractor who's built that space, that he actually did the last remodel of that commercial building you're looking to do. So he knows what's in the walls and the skeletons that are buried. And just in general, I found with starting so many companies, it's way more fun to work and do projects with partners. Now, it has to be the right partners, and you need to properly vet them and have the right agreements in place. But it's so much more fun doing this together.
I think you answered a lot of the how with that. I think that's really helpful. Now, for the listener who's like, yes, but there has to be a catch. Nothing is all sunshine, roses, and all of that. What would you say are the challenges that come with development versus other options that might be out there?
Yes, nothing is ever how it seems. And the project that you start with on day one, that you envision and you go, I want to do this, will not be the project that you actually open for business. I've done too many development projects because when you start, you go, I would love to turn this building into XYZ. Well, as you're going through the development process, I like to think about it as like unpeeling an onion. You're unpeeling an onion, you're being a detective, you're playing poker, you're doing a chess match. Like, you're using so much strategy and putting everything together because the city has zoning codes and what they would like to happen. And now, in smaller communities, the cities actually are your partners. They want to work with you and they want you to come in early and often, but there's still going to be some zoning restrictions and setbacks and utilities and things that you have to comply with. You're also probably not going to have perfect neighbors all around you. And you might just have some people who want to throw wrenches in your plan. And maybe as a result, you end up putting in an extra $25,000 to some really cool curb appeal and putting in some trees and benches and murals to tie the community together. And that's just all part of the process because you're getting to know everyone involved in it. Same way with construction materials. Like, who knows what's happening with pricing right now? So making sure you're talking with your contractors early and often and getting them involved in the process with your architects and with the city to say, okay, here's the costs of city, what you're trying to get me to do. Maybe we can come to a compromise. So, and your deal, I say it, your deal will blow up many times throughout the project and you'll feel like you lost it. And then you put all the pieces back together because you figure out how to solve the new challenge. So no, I will never tell you it will be perfect. It will be fast. You have this amazing exit. You will not have any new gray hair and wrinkles. That's not reality. But you can do it in the right order. And what I teach with my mentorship is how to do things in the right order. So you're not spending money until you have to spend money at each step of the way, because so many times I've been pulled into projects by developers who should know what they're doing and they've done it completely backwards. And like one example was in California, and they were already under construction on this very large shopping center. And they didn't have the right to have water. It was a whole process to work through how water rights even work in California, how one family owns them all. They lease them for 99 years to two other companies. So you have to go buy the rights from one of those two companies to get the water to work its way through the system to your project. So, $750,000 later and a couple months lost in construction, we were able to get water to the property. But that's where I think it's become scary to people, because it's not, hey, do these 10 steps in a row. It's more, do these, it's done in phases for development. And you'll do like 3 or 4 things at a time. Then you'll stop, you'll gather all the information and go, does this project still work as is? Make the necessary adjustments to make it still work, and then do a handful more things and come back. So you're constantly going out and regrouping, which to me is the fun part, because when it's black and white, I get bored. So I like solving problems. That's the number one thing. To be a real estate developer, you're solving problems. And that's fun to me. It's not fun for everyone, but if you are okay with calculated risk and you love solving problems and you know how to nurture relationships of all the people who will be involved along the way, you'll have a lot of fun at it.
That's a great way to summarize it and say, okay, here's the person for whom this is a great fit. Like, if this is you, do this strategy. Super, super helpful.
And if it's not you, then maybe you want to be the operator of the project. Once it's built and done and it's leased, maybe you want to be the property manager helping that. Which again, that part I don't necessarily want any part of.
Right. There's a place for everyone. Love that. Now, something else that you've hinted at is the timeline, right? You get more time with development, and yet that also sounds like it takes more time. So can we talk about perspective with like a long-term perspective, the time it takes to get a return over time? That's something sometimes people struggle with because they want the return now. So what does that timeline look like for real estate development?
That's a really good point. So with development, there is no such thing as instant gratification. It is why I have become such a good snowboarder and beach volleyball player. But so a good comparison is if you flip a house, you'll have it under contract and buy it in 7 to 45 days. Then you'll flip it in 1 to 3 months roughly. Let's say it's on those short time frames. And you're going to do a whole lot in between and then get it listed, sell it, done with it. Development is actually all of the same steps as flipping, only instead of being over a 3 to 6 month time frame, it's more so an 18 to 36 month time frame. So with that, we get a lot of people saying, can I work my W-2 and do development? And the answer is yes, because every step that it takes to flip, and you're so inundated with every little aspect, that has now stretched out over a longer period of time. You will have some times where you're waiting 30 days for someone to get back with you, like maybe city comments, or maybe you put out a GC bid, that you're doing nothing. But then you'll have other times where you're in the middle of due diligence, you have all your reports, and it will be very time consuming, and you block out the hours to do that. But it's all spread out over a longer time. It's also more professional and more higher margins. So you'll have a team of people who help you through that process. So that's the development, 18 to 36 months, which once you get that pipeline built, then you're rocking. But then afterwards, especially when we're talking in smaller communities, you probably are going to hold that for 7 to 10 years to truly realize the returns of that. And part of the reason for that is that our smaller communities, we have aging infrastructure. We have less redevelopment that happens. So as a result, you're probably at this point at April 16th of 2025, you're probably one of the first people in your community even considering redeveloping a building or vacant lot. But you're also creating that ripple effect of it literally just takes a little bit, but once one person starts doing something, it shows everyone else in the community that, hey, wait, if you can do it and that's possible, I want to try it too. And as a result, you're going to have the entire community going. So now you've boosted the values of all the properties in the community. And so that's the dollars part. But what I care more about is the community, the relationships, the connection, the way that you're now drawing your community together, because you've now created a space for people to live, work, or play. You've created that connection. Everyone's gathering and talking about it. And all of that. So you've created these jobs, you've created this awesome place. You've now created more tax dollars so the city can actually update the utilities, the roads, the parks. And now you go from maybe a little bit stale or a stagnant community to where you've got a vibrant, just excited, vibrant, the energy, you can just feel it. So yeah, you'll get the money in the long run, but you're doing the long game investment and you're building a just awesome connected community.
Hiring a virtual assistant shouldn't be a guessing game. If you're ready to offload time-consuming tasks and scale your real estate investing business, my Real Estate VA Launchpad course gives you the exact roadmap to find, train, and manage high-performing VAs. Learn how to delegate like a pro and take back your time. Enroll now at adriennegreen.com/courses, and you'll find that link in the show notes below. And that's one of the great things about real estate investing, however you do it, is you're not just helping Wall Street, you're helping Main Street, and you're helping everyday people make their communities and their lives, their families better, right?
Exactly. And I've been the outside developer coming in and dropping in these national tenants to towns. That's not the answer, because when we're done, then you've got people managing corporate offices. They don't care as much about the employees, the impact, the customer experience. But when locals are developing and locals are owning and operating, We care about reputation. We care about the experience of what our friends and family are going to have when they use this space. And it just creates a way better self-sustaining ecosystem and community vibe around it. So Main Street over Wall Street, invest and work with local.
And I will say, I see this firsthand. I lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee from 2020 through 2024. And there, I remember specifically the South Side area. Before I had moved there in years past, that I was told, that's an area people drive through without stopping. But then locals came in and they redeveloped that area. They started with, a few businesses, and now that's like the it place to be. So I've seen it happen. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's so inspiring. I remember Chattanooga back in the day, and now people are sending me giant development projects going, hey, I want to redevelop this into that. And it's a 10-acre multifamily. I'm like, that's pretty awesome to see that transformation.
Yes, it really is. So let's talk about, Kristi, if somebody's thinking about doing this, what strategies or systems? Let's talk a little bit about that concrete piece. For you and with development, what strategies or systems were some big game changers that helped you scale your portfolio over the years?
So development is a very old industry that has had very little technology improvements. Unless you're doing massive developments, we literally would, and even with those, we were still managing the projects with emails and spreadsheets. That's a little bit ridiculous for how many things that you're tracking. So once I had started my company, I realized very quickly that I became the knowledge bottleneck, because as an industry, we also do too much gatekeeping. And I think it's because the margins are so high and it's so lucrative that you don't really need to teach others and bring others in. But what I realized in my company and bringing in my team members is that I was the bottleneck, and for them to know what to do next, because development will take 18 months to 36 months, if not more, there needed to be a system that was set up. So I ended up creating, it was actually in 2020, I created our development project management software that took the entire process from acquiring the property all the way to the end, and made it step by step. So it's built out to where it took our PMs instead of 2 years to really be onboarded and speak the language and be able to manage a project, down to 4 months. Now, they still didn't know every aspect, but to anyone on the outside, they were talking the right lingo, they were making the right comments. And so it was detailed out task by task. Inside the task was, here's the steps, here's links to examples in Google Drive, here's your draft email. Change everything in blue and instructions are in red. And then that way it didn't matter which PM was coming out with the information. Jackie did the same thing as Nick, did the same thing as Logan, so that anyone getting information from us on the outside, it was coming to them consistently. And what that really did is, one, I stopped being the bottleneck, but two, it empowered our team members to not think about all the little things and how am I going to draft this email, what needs to go in it, what's the subject line, and really think about the project. And we found that we caught things much earlier in the process because they weren't so inundated with the tiny details. So that, hands down, building the software and leveraging technology to manage projects was a game changer.
Love that. I do the same kind of thing myself. And what I often hear from people who are overwhelmed at the time is they're like, yes, the thing is, it's so much faster for me to just do it myself, right? So if you're talking to that person who is overwhelmed, busy, they know they're the bottleneck in their business, and yet they don't see the way out, right? They're just trying to stay alive and keep their head above water right now. What would you say to them is the first thing they can do on that journey?
At some point, if you truly want to be successful and to keep doing it and not burn out, you're going to have to invest a little bit more time up front. And I'll give you an example. In 2020, I didn't slow down like the rest of the world. In fact, we got 4 times the number of projects that we were working on. And I was bringing on a couple new people in training, and I realized this whole thing is broken and I'm just going to build out the software and make those sacrifices. What that meant was I was also planning commissioner at the time and the community I lived in, and we were updating our master plan. So I had a psychotic year of 2020 to where I was working 12-hour days on probably 6 hours on the business, 6 hours on the software, and 3 to 6 hours of public meetings multiple times a week because we were updating our master plan while traveling the country in a truck camper with my dog, to where I would pit stop at friends and family across the country and go, I just need a room and I need to put my head down and I need to just spend these hours just cranking it out. And I remember my sister looking at me going, are you insane? what? You were up working before I even got up, and she gets up at 4:30 to do school and work out and everything. And I was still up at 12:30 at night because the public hearings were on the West Coast and I was on the East Coast at that point. She's like, what are you doing? Is this even worth it? And I said, I promise this is just for a small period of my life that I'm willing to make this sacrifice because I know that it will pay off tenfold in the future. Well, fast forward to the next year, and we had the fires in Tahoe that pushed me out. So we took off again, road tripping around the country. Only this time, when I get to my sister's house, I slept in and did a workout, worked for a couple hours. I was like, hey, are you guys going to be home for lunch? Do you guys want to, I don't know, do a mani-pedi in the afternoon? And they're like, wait, what? What happened to the Kristi who was working so hard last year? I'm like, well, I created systems and processes and tools that got me out of the business. So that sacrifice was well worth it. And now looking back, we all joke because along with the software, there were some other key hires. And it's like, how the heck did I ever do all of that? I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know how that was possible. It's not going to be easy and simple, but you actually have more time in a day than you think. So to add to that, to where you just go ahead and take the steps. If you think about what you spend your day on, you're constantly probably, if you're that busy, putting out the fires immediately in front of you, as opposed to thinking into the future and being able to understand what the 20% is that gets you 80% of the results. And I bet if you just stop doing 80% of that you thought was hot, that you thought was a fire, you're going to realize that those kind of solved themselves, or they weren't as big of a deal as you thought they were. So just time blocking and figuring that part out too.
There's a lot of wisdom in just that one part, guys. So if you're listening to this podcast, I would recommend just rewinding, maybe let's say, I think that's about 3 or 4 minutes, and listen to it all again, because I love it. It's like, there's sometimes when you just got to put your nose down and grind and realize it's for the greater good and you're going to have a payoff later. There's focusing on your top 20%. There's time blocking. There's a lot in there. I love it. Thank you so much, Kristi. That was great.
All things I learned from mentors, coaches, and people along the way.
Yes, yes. Well, I appreciate you passing it along and sharing it to our listeners here. So we're going to switch to our closing quickfire questions here. I got 2 here for you. So first, what is a transformational system that you've implemented in your business?
Hands down, the software that we created, and what turned into development specific software has turned into life management. It is our CRM. Every single company and business, once the development stuff was done, it was, okay, if we're buying businesses, here's how we buy and scale a business that we buy. If we are property managing the properties that I own, here's how we do that. And every single time we did that, yes, it made my life easier. What was more rewarding was watching the team members be empowered to go, like, I can take even more ownership and even more initiative now, because now I know what to do. So you're doing it for yourself, but you're also doing it for your team members and creating that good company culture that you have as well.
I love that. Right. Yes, you're empowering them. And then what is a book that has been transformational in your investing journey?
Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. They've written several good books together and they will continue to, but Dan Sullivan actually started Strategic Coach, which after reading Who Not How, The Gap and the Gain, 10X is easier than 2X, I drank the Kool-Aid, I joined Strategic Coach and created what they call the self-managing company. And it is 100% possible. And it is so liberating as an entrepreneur and a founder. So the concept of Who Not How is pretty straightforward. Instead of thinking, how do I figure this out? And I used to think I needed to know every aspect of the business before I could hire it out. The reality is we're not good at every aspect of the business. Yes, you need to know what that role entails, but what feels super heavy to me and just horrible to do, turns out that it's super light and easy for someone else. My very first hire, she does not want to solve the initial problem or challenge of, hey, how do we roll out 175 locations with coffee bean and tea leaf to add nitro brew to it? And that's project management, that's working with suppliers, health departments, everything. But that's where I love to excel. So once that was in place and it was like, okay, here's the system, here's what we do, then I'm bored, I'm done, I don't get energy from it. But that's where she comes in and she goes, okay, you just gave me the roadmap, I'm going to go execute. And she loves executing. Same way when it comes to spreadsheets and numbers. Yes, I like to see spreadsheets and numbers when they tell me, ooh, yay, lots of money. Outside of that, spreadsheets and numbers makes my head hurt. But then I bring in Kamaki, who she doesn't want to talk to people. She loves spreadsheets and numbers and all the stuff behind the scenes. I'm like, excellent. Here you go. You take that. And when you do that, and everyone's working in their unique ability, you just all have so much more energy, and it helps with internally with company culture and relationships, but that then spills out externally. It's something that we all struggle with because we're giving up control, but you're delegating to others to elevate them, to allow them to excel in the roles that they enjoy. And that also allows you to get rid of the things that drain your energy and don't give you any joy.
I agree completely. It makes such a big difference. Love it, love it, love it. All right. And finally, Kristi, if somebody wants to learn more about development, if they're interested in speaking to you further about this, if they just like to say thanks, what's the best way for them to reach out for you?
Yeah, they can go to, if it's development focused, you can go to localrealestatedeveloper.com. And then that shows our programs. I basically took our internal training for our PMs and created a blueprint course for anyone just curious of what it takes to be a developer. So that way they can know, is this for me? Is this not for me? And then for people who are serious, we have a 90-day masterclass. And then for people actually going through a deal who want to know that they've got someone in their corner to help them, we have our mentorship program. So that's everything at localrealestatedeveloper.com. And then if you're just curious about the kid from Ohio and how the heck I got into development, you could go to kristikandel.com. So KRISTIKANDEL.com. And I've got a book that talks a little bit more about my journey, my favorite podcasts, and just a little bit more there.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll have all those in the show notes. So if you didn't catch them, just go there and check it out. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Now, listeners, if you loved today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with a fellow investor who could benefit from hearing Kristi's story and wisdom. Your support helps bring us even more value-packed episodes. I look forward to seeing you soon.